Welcome to the Gary and Stein Sports Show. Joined by my co-host Will Stein, I'm Troy Gary. Our podcast is available at Apple, Spotify, Anchor, and Amazon. Also, you can catch us on the Sideline Sports Network. On today's show, we're joined by former outfielder for the Milwaukee Brewers. He also played for the Philadelphia Phillies organization, the Texas Rangers, Jim Rushford. Jim, thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, Will, I'll let you start out with the first question for Jim there.
So you're from the Chicago area. You grew up in Chicago. They're a baseball town. Some side is Cubs, some side is White Sox. Who did you grow up cheering for growing up in Chicago?
I was definitely a Cubs fan. I was a North Sider, grew up in Park Ridge on the northwest side. Typically, the North Siders are Cubs fans and South Siders are Sox fans. You get a few crossovers here and there for different reasons, but I had Cubs everything, and my dad used to take me to the Wrigley Field and see Cubs games. I maybe only caught a couple White Sox games over the years.
All right. You were a pretty good high school baseball player apparently, and so San Diego State. How did you decide on them, or did you just you visit them and went out there and just fell in love with the program? Or I mean, they produced a lot of major league players like yourself, Tony Gwynn, Mark Grace, Steven Strasburg, just a few there. So how did that happen, and how did you pick San Diego State?
So, I mean, that's kind of a crazy story, and a lot of it's due to, I was totally naive. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a good baseball player. Illinois State wanted me bad. They were offering me a full ride, everything. I had Notre Dame offering me a partial. And I really just wanted to get out of the cold weather and play, play somewhere where the weather was more conducive to baseball. And you look at the top ranked teams, and like I think all the kids, they all want to go D1, they all want to play for number one team and all this, and I wasn't any different. So I wrote letters to all the top schools, and the one advantage I had, because this is 1991, my dad had a camcorder, so he had a lot of video of me. So I was able to send that to a highlight tape to all the schools, which is, that's an everyday thing now. But back then, that gave me a huge advantage. And, some of them responded. But what ultimately was it was like a Baseball America, and they were just listed all the guys that got drafted out of San Diego State. I'm like, well, San Diego sounds really nice. And, that's what I'm going for. I'm hoping to get drafted by a major league team someday. So, I sent one out to Coach Dietz, Coach Jim Dietz over there. He was the coach before Tony Gwynn. He recently passed away. And he invited me out, and he said, I think you can play here. We didn't get to see you a lot, but we have a JV team too. So, my dad kind of figured, well, worst case scenario, you'll at least you won't waste a year. You'll play on the JV team or something like that. So I turned down the scholarships at Illinois State and Notre Dame, and I walked on to San Diego State, and I made it, and I played a little my freshman year. But I would never, I coach kids now, and I would never advise any of them to do that. It was just, I just did what I wanted to do, and I had no idea about how foolish I was being. But I was excited for it, so I guess that's maybe the big thing.
Now, what would you advise a kid to do now in this day and age, going through the college recruiting process, and knowing your story that it took you longer to get in the pros? How would you advise kids that want to continue their baseball after high school?
Right. So that's what I'm doing a lot of now, because my son just graduated high school. So I went through it with him, but I coach. So I help all sorts of kids. The biggest thing everyone needs to know is you got to go where you're wanted. So, by that, I would have told myself as an 18-year-old go to Illinois State. They want to make you the centerpiece of their program. They're offering you everything they want you, because you're gonna get the most opportunities there. They're gonna take good care of you there because that's where you want. And that's what I advise kids. But the other thing is, this is a hard one because you got to be realistic about your ability. Like everyone wants to go D1, but not everybody's a D1 talent. So you really got to find a level that matches your talent. I think the way I would sum it up is you want to be the biggest fish in the biggest pond you can possibly be in, but you don't want to be a small fish in a huge pond. You want to go somewhere where you're going to get the playing time, you're going to stand out, and you could advance to the next level. But if you just kind of aren't realistic with yourself and go, I'm a D1 guy, I'm this, you might end up just wasting 2 years sitting on the bench before you're whatever, or show up to a school and get cut or that kind of thing. So, you gotta be good, estimate your ability accurately. You definitely you gotta go find them. They're not gonna find you. There's too many kids playing all over the country. You gotta contact those coaches and say, I want to play for your school, and you should have highlights and stats and metrics and all that prepared. And then, out of that list of schools, the ones that are really interested in you, those are the ones you should choose from. And then there's practical things like, finances and stuff. Like I had a partial to Notre Dame, but I don't know that I could have covered the rest of that tuition. So, you don't want to get in a mountain of debt either. So that always factors in too.
Okay, kind of following up on that, like you said, your son, pretty highly rated player. I've seen some highlights. So how do you advise kids in general the decision whether if they get drafted, say mid-round, to either skip college or sign that contract?
Yeah, well, like I didn't go through it because I was not a prospect out of high school, and I didn't get drafted out of college, and I went, played independent ball. So that was a whole different, that was kind of coming in the back way. But I think what's changed over the years is it used to be like they would draft till they got up to like the 100 something round, and they'd offer a kid $5,000 or something, and whereas the kid probably has like a scholarship to some college or something, like, and you might as well get that scholarship, play ball a few years, get your education, and then if you develop into a good player, you'll get drafted again probably. But it's totally different now. They cut the minor leagues by 33%. It only goes to 20 rounds in the draft. So getting in and getting a chance is super hard. And then in addition to that, the minor league pay has always been terrible, but they bumped it up a little, but they're paying for housing now. And basically, if you get drafted and sign, your college tuition, is guaranteed and paid for. So now it's really attractive to sign. And I think it's taking a big risk to not sign and hope they're going to come around to you, in 3 years when you're a junior at a D1 or get you out of JUCO. I just think it's too hard to get in to pass it up. So I know every person's situation is a little different, but where I sit, I'd be like, I mean, my son is, he has a few teams looking at him, and he could get drafted. And if he does, I'm going to be encouraging him to take it.
All right, go ahead, Will.
So speaking of scholarships, contracts, money, and all that good stuff, you're probably familiar with the NIL process and what that's doing for college athletes, high school athletes. do you think NIL will be something that's talked about in baseball like it is in football right now? Or how do you see NIL impacting baseball in the draft in the future?
So definitely not an expert on it. I did look some of that stuff up because I had to educate myself to see what my son's options might be. I saw that it's not much of a factor with baseball at this point. I think, about the most it really amounts to is, getting like free equipment and, just little, I think they estimate like a few $1,000s or something like that. And that's only if you're going to one of the big schools that have one of those contracts. And, basketball and football, totally different animals. Now, somehow they get creative and they can make it be something with baseball. But like, I think as we sit here right now, it's not really like anything that would change, a decision between, college and pro. It's sort of like a trivial amount. But it is nice that, especially, in the major sports that do earn however, hundreds of millions of dollars for the NCAA and the schools and stuff like that, that the players are getting something. And, I imagine, I think maybe, as far as NIL and baseball, I think the biggest effect it's going to have right away is the schools that can get those deals are going to be able to attract more of the better players. And I think it might make the competitive balance a lot more lopsided because they're the ones who got the deals are going to score all the big players and the other ones are going to get left in the dust. And that's probably the only thing I can see that seems really clear about it right now as far as baseball.
All right. The next question I have for you, for those that don't know, of course, I know your story, but talk about how watching WGN kind of restarted your career and how that all went down.
Yeah, so like I played 4 years at San Diego State. I wasn't drafted. I did try independent ball a couple times, a couple false starts, we'll call them maybe. I didn't, and I was getting older and I was married, and I was like, I got to get on with my life, start a career, so I started working, but I was delivering pizzas. I wasn't in a career, let's put it that way. I was just making some money to pay the bills. And WGN being a super station, I lived in San Diego, once I went to San Diego State, and it was on, the TV was on WGN, and there was, sports segment came on. It was Dan Roan, the sportscaster, and he had Ron Kittle in the batting cages, and they were pumping up the new Northern League team, the Schaumburg Flyers. And I knew the Northern League had a great reputation. It's being, top independent league, and players got picked up out of there. And I grew up in Chicago, and I'm like, well, this team's right where I grew up, so this would be awesome for me. And I just kind of sighed, thinking, I wish I could do that, but it's kind of like that horse has left the barn, and my wife saw me and my reaction to it. She went into the other room and did a little internet search and found Schaumburg Flyers and found out, hey, they're having a tryout next week in Chicago, and you should go. And I'm like, oh, awesome. I mean, like, I was just like, she really supports this. Awesome. I'm like, well, I definitely want to do it. And then the next thing was I had to call my mom and say, hey, can you buy me a plane ticket a week out to Chicago? Because I didn't have that kind of cash. And so I flew out and I used my sister's cards. My sister, she still lives in Chicago. And I went to this tryout and I did really well, but it was like one of those big cattle calls, like 200 people. You get people showing up in gym shoes and no hat and cut off jeans or something, and then they they took me and maybe a couple other the better players, and we got into the smaller mix of Schaumburg Flyers, like spring training, I guess you could call it. And I just battled I had to compete, and I outplayed a bunch of people, and bumped a few people and made the team. And that was '99. And I played, got halfway through the year, and I had a season-ending injury, and they sent me home. And I was really I separated my shoulder running an outfield wall, and but I was starting to do really good. Like, as I was playing every day, and things were clicking for me, and just everything was gelling. I was like, I can be a pretty good player, but I felt like I was cut short. And I'm like, if I don't go back, this is going to be it. It's going to be over. And I felt like, no, I didn't get my one chance I wanted. I was only halfway through. So I kept calling them every day. I'm like, hey, can you guys bring me back? You guys bring me back. And they're finally like, I bugged them enough that they're finally like, well, if you can get a doctor's release, we'll bring you back. And I did. My shoulder was still only like halfway healed. And like, I couldn't release my top hand when I swung. I had to keep two hands on the back because my right shoulder would have just went with it. And they brought me back, and I hit another home run at the end and finished the season. And I'm like, that was awesome. I got to do this again, So I started training really hard all off season for the next year, thinking I'm going to go back to Schaumburg, and that's going to be my year. And so I worked my butt off all off season, and then come like February, March, Ron Kittle calls me up, and he's like, well, I want to be the one to tell you, but and I had nothing to do with this, but you've been traded to Duluth. And I'm like, Duluth? All I remember about Duluth from the time we went there was it was the coldest place I had ever been in my life. We had a freezing series there. And I grew up in Chicago, so this was not great news at first, and I was traded for a shortstop that batted 220. And as it turned out, that shortstop never actually showed up. He just decided to quit. So they basically gave me away. And but I'm like, man, I worked my butt off, and I'm on Duluth, and I want my chance. So I went, and it's, long story short, which I'm sure we'll get into. I mean, it turned out to be a phenomenal experience for me, and one that got me to the next step, which was into the Milwaukee Brewers organization.
Yeah, before we talk about that 2000 season, you were Rookie of the Year in the Northern League that year. Anthony Big Papa, as they called him, Lewis, was Independent League Player of the Year. What do you most remember about that year? And give me what your like I say, you talked a little bit about Duluth, but how was that city, and how did you enjoy your short time here?
Well, I loved it. I mean, at first I'm just like, I'm here to play baseball, and this is where I got to be and what I got to do it. But Anthony Big Papa Lewis and Tony Mitchell, they're veteran players, and they just really showed me the ropes, took me under their wing. They were my mentors, and they really helped me mature as a player and just understand what being a minor league, being a professional baseball player is all about. And as a team, we're a tight knit bunch, and we gelled together, and we ultimately ended up winning the championship for the the North Division.
Yeah.
And the clubby JT Tellin let me stay at his house for a pretty small rent. And so, that made it affordable. And Gary and George Stavronos did a great job, making deals with local businesses. We got a free meal at the hometown buffet every day, which absolutely loved. I mean, go in there and just crush chicken wings, and they had this raisin bread pudding that I loved. But I mean, you're working out, you're playing ball, you need good nourishment, and we're not making much money, so that meal was huge. And then there was a deal at downtown at the gym, don't remember the name, and I was in there every day. I went and worked out, so it's like I got a super cheap place to stay, a few blocks from the field. I got awesome free meal every day. I got a gym to work out at, and you know, I got a great team to play on. I mean, so it was perfect, you know, like couldn't ask for anything more. That's all you want as a baseball player. That's all you want is a situation where you can excel and be at your best. And that turned out to be it, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I gotta say, and great fans too. You know, loyal, diehard fans that came out and supported the team night after night. I mean, that was huge too. That made it a great place to play. And you know, that was the old Wade Stadium. I've seen pictures of the new one,
Yeah.
but the old one was pretty cool. Had a lot of character.
Yeah. Talk about the the grind of a Major League Baseball season. For those that don't know, the bus rides, like you said, the trying to find housing. A lot of that time back then, like when you played, there would be sponsors, people that would let you stay there. You kind of briefly mentioned about now how Major League Baseball has kind of stepped up and provided housing, but just talk about that sort of atmosphere of the daily grind of being a minor leaguer.
Well, I mean, it's hard work, and it will test you in different ways. I mean, getting through a minor league season, you'll really find out who you are, because there's gonna be moments when, you know, you got to reach down at your lowest point, like, and you got to figure out, you know, how you're gonna get yourself out of it. But it's physically, mentally. For starters, you know, I spent a lot of time away from my wife. So you got to move, go far away and leave everybody, and you're on your own. And you know, you don't really necessarily, you don't have anyone supporting you. And if it's maybe you're not doing all that well, you can hit some pretty low points. You have to find your own place to live, and that all comes out of your paycheck. And you know, independent ball, you know, really low salaries, because independent teams are, you know, standalone businesses that need to turn a profit. Minors with affiliated baseball, not much better, but they have the ability to pay more. They just didn't want to, you know, just until they got a lot of pressure put on them for it. But you know, if you're only making like $1,000 a month, I mean, my first year I played in the Boys County in '96, I made $500 a month. And I think in Duluth, I think Schaumburg was 750 and Duluth was 900. And then with the Brewers in High Desert, I think I made like 1,000 or something like that. But then you gotta go rent a place and you gotta rent furniture, you know, like there, and everything's out of your own pocket. So that money goes super fast. So you really don't, it doesn't, what you get paid doesn't cover what it's costing you to do it. Like you need help for sure, or something. Like some guys are lucky enough, like maybe they learn how to be welding or something like that, and they can go make a bunch of money in the off season. I mean, that's the way to go. But if you don't have that, man, you're gonna be scraping by or running up the credit card or something. But like if you're in affiliated minors, I mean, even in independent ball, you can get traded. In the minors, you can get traded. You can get moved up or down a level, and they just tell you, and you gotta pack all your stuff up and catch the plane in the morning and be in the next city. And you gotta somehow figure out how you're closing up on one apartment and then finding a new place to live in the next place. So it's kind of, I mean, it can be a rough life, and then physically playing 9 innings every night, and at high competition level, and stress level too, a little bit too, because you're like, my whole career and everything I ever wanted in life depends on how I perform out here. So I mean, you're using a lot of mental and physical energy. If you're not doing well, the fans will be the first to let you know. So you got that, and then the bus rides. Geez, I mean, in the minor leagues, they can be horrendous. I mean, so you might play a 6-game homestand, and then on that last night, it could be a hard-fought battle, but you guys maybe lose, and everyone's down in the dumps, but you just got to pack all your stuff. You already have your suitcase at the park, and everyone's piling in a bus, and they might drive 6, 8, 10, some 12 hours all night long to the next city, and you got to find a comfortable way to sleep on the bus, and you might not get there till the next morning when the sun's already up, and then you'll get into a hotel and you might catch a few hours of sleep and a lunch, and then you're right to the ballpark and you got to perform again. And that goes on for, depending on what league you're in, but that can go on for 4 or 5, 6 months, and that takes its toll on you for sure. It can wear you out, and but you just remind yourself every day, like this, where you want to get to and what you're trying to do. And, you can't let being tired or being upset about what happened the night before or being, homesick, you can't let that affect you playing. You just got to, and that's the grind, you got to play hurt because nobody's, taking you anywhere. If you have an injury, you got to be out there performing and putting up numbers. So, but that's the fun of it too, because it's a massive challenge, so, if you just battle and see how far you can get.
All right, sweet. So after that season, the Milwaukee Brewers called. Can you explain or tell us what you remember about getting that phone call?
Yeah, I mean, like, I played in '96 for a team, and there's a first-year manager. And he eventually moved on into the Brewers organization. He was following my career, and he saw what I was doing in Duluth. And I made a good impression on him. And he's like, well, this is the kind of guy, we're cleaning house, we're starting over here in Milwaukee. And this kind of guy we want to have to, set a good example for our younger kids, because now I'm the older guy. And I'm like, great, but I had a lot of like, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, it never does kind of thing. So I didn't really want to get too excited. And then Greg, that was R.C. Lichtenstein, he's in the Devil Rays organization. He's been at the AA, like Montgomery Biscuits, for years now. And then Greg Riddock, who was the minor league farm director for the Brewers, called me up, and I'm like, okay, now I know this is serious. This isn't just someone blowing smoke, And they sent me a contract, and I signed it. I sent it back, and I still didn't want to tell anyone or get excited because I just didn't. There's gonna be a catch to all this. This isn't really happening. And it wasn't until I saw in my minor league transactions, like Jim Rushford signed with Milwaukee Brewers, such and such a day, that I'm like, okay, it's real, but I didn't even want to celebrate till I saw it in writing, because I had just had so many disappointments along the way. But man, there's nothing more exciting for me, because for me, that was the hardest step of the entire journey, was just getting a major league organization to give me a chance. And that it happened is it's almost like winning the lottery, really, because tons of guys do great, but still never get a chance. It's, the independent leagues are awesome because they give guys that opportunity to maybe get it, but there's no guarantees, And so if you're one of those lucky ones, that's a big deal. And man, I made the most of it because I knew, how lucky I was to be there, and I'd already experienced what it was like to not have baseball and not be in baseball, and basically have that dream had been dead a couple times before, and now all of a sudden it's alive again. It came back to life, and it's so. I definitely did not take that for granted.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you a date, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But September 3rd, 2002, your major league debut. How surreal was that, number one, for you to be called up like that and then make your debut in Chicago? And then just talk about how you got that call and how you were informed of making the big leagues.
Well, that's a weird story too. my manager called me and there's a few games left in the season. He's like, look, you're gonna get called up in a few days, but you need to make sure you have some nice clothes and stuff. Because like he wanted to tell me in advance because he wanted to make sure I went out shopping. So I bought clothes that was worthy of a major league player, because all I had was ratty stuff and stuff that a friend had given to me. And I'm like, oh, okay, and then that game that night or the next night, I'm rounding third and I feel my groin pull. But just a little tiny pull, but it pulled. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I sit there like, do I tell him? Do I not? Like it was a dilemma, but I was like, if I could just have a couple of days off, it'll be okay because it's very minor. So I told him, and he just picks up the phone and he's calling Milwaukee like, yeah, he pulled his groin. And I just thought I completely blew my one chance right there. And I was fortunate enough that the trainer worked with me every day. And they work with me and they just like, okay, if you can get back out, we'll give you a couple of days of get therapy and stuff. And you can get back out there and show you're healthy, then you'll go up. So now it's like a panic. So anyway, the last day of the season, which I guess would have been, September 2nd, the last game in Louisville, I was on Indianapolis, which was a Brewers AAA, and we finished on the road in Louisville. Had all my belongings packed in the minivan. My wife was there, and my first child, my daughter Kelly, was a baby. And the minivan's just packed to the ceiling, like every square inch of it's filled up. And I played a game. I go 1 for 3, and it's like the 6th, 7th inning, and the coach takes me out. He gets on the phone in the dugout, and he's like, "Yep, he was 1 for 3. He's good." And he's like, "Okay." Hangs up. He's like, "All right, go meet the team in Chicago." And I just took a shower, grabbed all my stuff, and I ran out of the clubhouse and into the minivan where my wife was waiting. I'm like, just go to Chicago right away before they change their minds. I'm like, just step on it. And we got to Chicago that night, and the next day I'm at Wrigley Field. And yeah, to go, grew up a Cubs fan, to go to games, and I mean, like when you're screwing around in the park and imagining yourself doing all these great baseball things like every kid that plays baseball does. I mean, I'm doing them all at Wrigley Field. That was my dream. And just being on that field was awesome. I stepped out for the first time, and Sammy Sosa, looks at me, and he walks over and he introduces himself. And Sammy Sosa, Jim Rushford, I'm nice to meet you. And he's like, the pleasure is mine. Like as if I was a superstar and he was the young kid, like it was awesome. I think I had like unknowingly dozens of people I grew up with were at the game. It was a Friday night game at Wrigley Field. So they, people got pictures and all that stuff. It was just an awesome experience. Especially for that first one to be at Wrigley. And, it wouldn't have been had I not had that little groin thing. I was supposed to start it in Cincinnati, Synergy Field. I don't know what they call it now. But sorry, I'm not like super up on all my sports, but I was supposed to start in Cincinnati, but it ended up being Wrigley. And I'm like, well, I think it's just meant to be this way.
Awesome. So do you still have your first major league hit baseball? Or did you get it?
I do. It took me 12 at bats to get it, but it finally happened. And they got the ball for me. And then, a few weeks later, I hit a home run in Arizona, and they got that ball for me too.
Awesome. Yeah. So you got, did the team go seek it out, or did you, or did Arizona kind of know to send somebody over there?
It was, I want to say it was a tie game, but it was, like 5th inning or so. And I had a long at bat. Rick Helling was pitching. And I was like, I fouled off 6, 7 pitches. And finally, like, he hung a curve. I dropped the head on it, pulled it right down the right field line. And I knew I got it, but I didn't know if it was going to stay fair. And so as I'm running around first base, it hits the foul pole and then ricochets in the bullpen. And that's the Brewers bullpen. So they all got it for me.
Oh,
But,
sweet,
I saw
sweet.
I saw the umpire, do this. It was like, like the 5,000-pound weight just came off my shoulders and I just floated around the base. Because I'm like, that's the one thing I always wanted to do, was just hit a home run in the major leagues. Like, and I'm like, no matter what, there's gonna be a 1 in that record book in the stats, and nobody can take that 1 home run away. So it was just, for me, that was like my biggest moment in baseball. If I have to pick like one singular moment.
Awesome. I got one more question for you, Jim, but Will, do you got anything else before I ask?
So, if you could change anything about your baseball journey, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I could probably make a pretty long list. I made a lot of mistakes. Passing up Illinois State might have been a mistake. Not understanding the benefits of the weight room and what it can do to help you play at a younger age was one. I was sent to an independent ball team out of college, and I thought, well, what's this league? I don't know. My career's over, and I quit the team. And I just went and started working. So I quit a few things. I might have burned a bridge or two. I think, but that's how I learned that this is, I learned from those mistakes. And that's why when I come back in 99, now I know all the things I did wrong. And I'm like, I'm not going to do any of those things wrong this time. And I'm going to do everything the way I should have done it the first time. And that's why things, came together for me. And I was fortunate because I was getting up there in years. But, that's why the independent league's awesome, because, it's a second chance. I think the biggest thing though, like once I got farther along, was confidence. Like I always felt, because I had been passed up so many times along the way, that I didn't know if I belonged with the best players. So when I got on the field with Sammy Sosa and Albert Pujols and Richie Sexton, all these guys, I was pretty intimidated, and I think that was a mistake. I mean, you got to really get comfortable in your own skin and feel like you belong. And prior to that, on the way up, what worked for me was I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was a guy who had nothing to lose. So that perspective, that mindset worked really well for me. But then once they put me in the major leagues, I'm like, well, now who am I angry at? They gave me everything. And my whole perspective that was working for me has now got flipped on me. And now I got to figure out, okay, now instead of having nothing to lose and being angry because you didn't get, this and that, now they gave you everything and you got everything to lose. And that was a whole just different perspective for me that sort of threw me for a loop, and I wish I handled that better, but I just never thought about it because I was just so used to being the outsider trying to fight my way in. Then once I got there, I wasn't really sure what to do because it just didn't fit the script that I, had running in my head.
All right. One last thing here, and your story is about never quitting, and I just love it. What can you say for people, not only in sports, but when they have a goal and they want to achieve something, about how to keep perseverance and just kind of fighting through all that, because in the end, like you, it paid off.
Yeah, I think never underestimate the value of showing up every day and putting in your best effort, because when I coach kids now, they want instant gratification. The one time they do something, they want something, and it's like, no, you have to like just keep plugging away, but you have to trust the process and know and understand, if you keep doing that, you are going to get really far. Because I mean, like half the battle is just, showing up on time, just doing all the right things, like the things that are totally in your control that don't even require talent. They just require, effort and preparation. And if you do those things, you're gonna get really far, and you're gonna pass a whole bunch of people that had way more talent than you, for sure, just by consistent everyday effort. You want to also work smart, not just hard, but work smart. So you should have a mapped out plan, like short-term and long-term goals, and process you're following with checkpoints along the way. Because the other thing is like, that was a mistake I made early on. I was a hard worker, but I wasn't focusing all my efforts in any one direction. I was just doing a lot of work. It wasn't until I got systematic about everything with my weight training and my hitting and like, running 60s and all these things with, measurement goals, and that everything started coming together for me. So, I mean, and the thing is, and in the end, even if you don't get as far as you want, you're going to feel good about yourself, and you're going to be a lot happier with yourself and have gotten a lot farther than if you get discouraged right away, because you don't want to have to live with regrets, and that's why I was fortunate, because I got that little brief period where I had regrets, so I already knew what it would be like to give up, so that's why I never did after that. But I was fortunate enough to get that second chance. But if I could save people the time and just say, just don't ever give up in the first place. I always think of the Babe Ruth thing, like you can't beat a person who never quits. And that's really maybe one of the best, one-liners ever.
All right. Well, Jim, we really appreciate you joining us today. Check out this on Spotify, Apple, wherever your local favorite streaming service. And Will, thanks for having us. You got anything else for goodbye for Jim here?
So I guess being a Cubs fan, what do you remember about Harry Carey the most?
Harry Carey is classic. That he would drink the Budweisers and just line them up in front of him, and by the seventh inning, he'd be slurring his words. Steve Stone would have to kind of take over for him. But the guy was like Chicago all the way. I think the Cubs have a saying, win or lose, we still booze. That was Harry Carey. Here's like my memory in my childhood is the TV's on, WGN. The Cubs game is in the background, and Harry Carey and Steve Stone are, doing the game. And that's my childhood right there. So, man, that guy was a classic. He's a legend. Harry's awesome.
All right, Jim. Well, thanks again for your time, and good luck to your son in the future. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.